Reformed Church.
I'll go ahead and we'll start again where we started from the previous service, which is actually Romans chapter 6 from Sunday. And then we'll go from there, and then we'll see how it goes. Romans chapter 6 and verse number 4. And it says, therefore we are buried with him by baptism into life, that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we should walk in newness of life. So what we were saying pre-service is, you see clearly how we're compared to Jesus, right? It says that therefore we are buried with him by baptism into death, that just like that like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father. So it's funny because you think that all it's talking about is just that simply he was given life and then stopping there. But it goes, because of what it says later in the verse, you know that it's talking about Christ and also the new life that he has, right? Because we're being compared. So watch. So let's go from the beginning again. Verse 4, therefore we are buried with him by baptism into death, that like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so also we should walk in newness of life. So you see things, and you see that actually all over Scripture, where synonyms are kind of brought out, right? Where newness of life is synonymous then with Christ being raised from the dead by the Spirit of God, right? So then there's a couple of things that are answered there, right? You know where we get our newness of life, because you know that we get it from the glory of the Father. And the glory of the Father there is referring actually to Romans 8:11, and I'll read that to you real quick. We don't have to go there on the screen, but Romans 8:11 says, but if the Spirit of him that raised up Jesus from the dead dwell in you, that he that raised up Christ from the dead shall also quicken your mortal bodies by his Spirit that dwells in you. So you know that Christ was raised up from the dead by the Spirit of God, and here obviously he's referred to as the glory of the Father. So even so we should walk in newness of life. So what you see is that the Lord encouraging us, right, and telling us to be able to go ahead and walk in that newness of life that we have with ease, right? So let's go from there, and let's go to Ephesians chapter 4 with that in mind. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse number 17. This I say therefore and testify in the Lord, that you henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk, in the vanity of their minds. So just before, right, and I'll have it in this kind of marked over here with my finger here, in Romans chapter 6, we were saying that we should walk in that newness of life, right? Walk in the newness of life that we have now by the Spirit of God. And here he's telling us in Ephesians chapter 4, it says that we should not walk as the Gentiles walk. So we should walk in the newness of life that we have by the Spirit of God, but not walk in the vanity of their mind, which is really vanity there, or futility is another word for that, right? Walking in the vanity of their mind is walking in the absence of Christ, walking in the lack of knowledge of what they have. There's an emptiness, a void of the knowledge of God, right? And you see the effects of walking as a Gentile, right? Because actually I heard Pastor Mike say that before, here in verse number 17, it's making reference to us not to walk as the world, right? But it's speaking to Christians, right? Not to walk as the world, right? But then verse 18 describes then how the world walks, right? The world walks in the vanity of their mind, and that means that they have their understanding darkened, and because their understanding is darkened, they're alienated from the life of God. So you see, and the word that came to mind, and I shared it pre-service, was inhibitor, right? Like what is the inhibitor to the life of God? What is it that inhibits people of the world to have access to the life of God? What is it even that keeps a believer from the life of God ever, in any circumstance in their life, right? And the only thing that is the blocker there is ignorance. There is nothing else. And it's cool because people still think today that the life of God can't work freely in me because it's not that day, or it's not whatever it is that they're waiting for. It's not a miracle that God does here or there or anywhere. But here you clearly say, speaking about the world, right? And speaking about us not walking in that vanity or in that in that understanding darkened. It says, having the understanding darkened, speaking of the world, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them because of the blindness of their hearts. So everything that causes, the only thing that inhibits and everything that causes the absence of the life of God in an individual is just the lack of knowledge of what Jesus has done. And he goes a bit further to describe that. In verse number 19, he says, who being past feeling, still speaking about people in the world, who being past feeling have given themselves over unto lasciviousness to work all uncleanness with greediness. He says, but you have not so learned Christ. So you see then that the ignorance that he's talking about in verse number 18 is Christ, right? But because it says, but you have not so learned Christ. So you that are not alienated from the life of God, you that don't walk around with your understanding darkened, but have the eyes of your understanding enlightened, right, from Ephesians 1. Here he says, you have not so learned Christ. Verse 21, if so be that you have heard him, and have been taught by him. Heard him, Jesus, and have been taught by him, Jesus, as the truth is in Jesus, right? Taught by him, right? Because it is by his spirit that we know. It is by his spirit that we're taught, right? And then in verse number 22, it says that you put off concerning the former conversation, the old man. And we talked about during Sunday service about the old man and the new man, right? The old man is that which is carnal. The old man is that which is subject to death. The old man is that which is of age that decays, right? The new man is that which is eternal, right? The new man is that which is everlasting. The new man is according to God and of God, right? Here we'll see that again. He says in verse 22 that you put off concerning the former conversation or the former conduct. I think New King James says that. The former conduct or the former conversation, the old man, which is corrupt according to deceitful lusts, but be renewed. Here's the ease, right? Just be renewed then in the spirit of your mind, that you put on the new man. So we said putting off the old and putting on the new is one and the same. It's one action, right? It's the renewal of your mind. You don't have to try to put off the old way of thinking. You don't have to frustrate yourself with, oh, why do I think this way? Or I should know better or whatever, right? Putting off the old and putting on the new, which in other places in the Bible it talks about putting on Christ. Here it's talking about putting on the new man. And put on the new man, right? It says in verse 24, and put on the new man, which after God is created in righteousness and true holiness. So you see that the new man, right? Like, who is it that we are like? Because sometimes when you hear about being made a new creation, you don't really know, well, what does that actually mean? Like, who was I made like? Here you see clearly, right? That the new man, which after God is created in righteousness and true holiness. Ephesians 2 talks about how we are created in Christ Jesus, right, unto good works. So we know that we are like Christ. We know that we are like God, right? We know that we have been created in righteousness and true holiness. So we are righteous like Christ is righteous. We are holy as he is holy, right? So the word says to be holy as God is holy. That's talking about what? Walking in the newness of life. You have already been made holy, but we don't manifest that holiness, right? We have already been made righteous, but we don't always walk in the righteousness of God, right? We have power towards wealth, but there are many believers that are suffering with lack of funds in their lives, right? So it's not that we don't have it. It's just that we're not walking it. And that's why we started off in Romans chapter 6, right? Where he says to go ahead and walk in that newness of life. In other words, you have that newness in you. So you have the ability, right, through the renewal of your mind to walk in it. There's one little thing that I want to add to that I don't think we really mentioned during the first service. I say first service, not yet. During, I guess, first service, yeah, earlier with the Helps Ministry. Let's go real quick to Romans 8. Romans 8, just one quick thing there. Romans chapter 8. When we talk about walking in the newness of life, right? And you just read, it says that we have been created, right, according to God or after God in righteousness and true holiness, right? In Romans chapter 8 and verse number 10, or look at verse number 9 better, sorry. Verse number 9, Romans 8:9. It says, but you are not in the flesh, but in the spirit, right? Because that has to do with who you are and how you've been made, right? You're not controlled by the flesh or the desires thereof, but you are now possessed by the Spirit of God, right? It says, but but you are not in the flesh, but in the spirit, if so be that the spirit of God dwells in you, right? So we know where that new creationist, that newness of life comes from. It comes from the same spirit that rose Christ from the dead, which is the spirit of God. It's that spirit that lives on the inside of us, right? You also remember, I think it's Romans chapter 6, maybe, possibly, I don't remember exactly, that talks about the law of the spirit of life in Christ Jesus, right? The law of the spirit of life. The spirit of life, right? So he's called the spirit of life, and the newness of life that we have, right, is from the spirit of God, right? But you are not in the flesh, but in the spirit, if so be that the spirit of God dwell in you. Now, if any man have not the spirit of Christ, he is none of his. And if Christ be in you, if Christ be in you, the body is dead because of sin, but the spirit is life. Why? Because of righteousness. So we have been created in righteousness and in true holiness. And the righteousness that you have is your complete and full qualification to all of the life of God that you have in you. So the only inhibitor to the life of God is ignorance, right? Lack of knowledge. But the pass that you need, right? The access that you need to that grace that you stand in, you already possess that as well, right? Which is the righteousness of God. So there is nothing stopping a believer. There is nothing stopping a believer. Obviously, there's nothing stopping an unbeliever other than, right, the acceptance of what Christ has done. So it's easy for the unbeliever, and it's even easier for us, right? To be able to receive from the life of God, what? After the knowledge of what he has finished, right? When you continually see yourself just as he is, when you learn, when it becomes just a natural thing for you to behold the glory of the Lord as in a mirror, and you're accustomed to seeing yourself as he is, and that the things that you see that are of this world seem so foreign and so far removed from who you are, right? In other words, it'll become opposite. Many times in our lives, the things that are like the world seem very common to us, right? But it actually comes to a place where it's the exact opposite, where you walk so much in that new life that the old actually seems old. The truth is that the old is already old and the new is already new, right? And you are all new, right? You are all new. Every single part of you that matters is new. You will receive a new body, right? But every part of that matters that can control your emotions, control your actions, control the outcomes of your life, control the way you think, control everything. Life unto your body, you read right here, right? Life, if Christ be in you, we read in verse number 10, if Christ be in you, the body is dead because of sin, but the spirit is life because of righteousness, right? Actually, let's read two more verses. But if the spirit of him that raised up Jesus from the dead, which is what we read before, but if the spirit of him that raised up Jesus from the dead dwell in you, he that raised up Christ from the dead will also quicken your mortal bodies by his spirit that lives in you. So having a mortal body is no longer an excuse for the believer, right? That, oh, I have to suffer because I have a mortal body. You just lost your excuse. You are full of God, right? So everything that matters to your mortal body, or everything that matters to the way that you think, or everything that matters to your emotions, or everything that matters to the way that you talk, or everything that matters to the way that you act, right, is already fully on the inside of you. So the newness we have, and the Lord just encourages and says, you know what? Walk in that newness, right? Walk in that newness because you can, right? Walk in that newness because you can. And while I was just, when Pastor Mike was praying there a little bit, it was just interesting, right? That I kept getting this picture in my mind of just a little baby that, and maybe it's just because I have my grandson in my mind, but a little baby boy that knows how to walk, right? He knows how to walk. He's not perfect at it, but he knows how to walk. But sometimes, even though you know how to walk, walking itself may seem a little scary because you're walking in something that's not completely comfortable to you. Now, you can know something and be established in it, but yet not be comfortable enough yet to walk in that, right? So you know it up here, and you're confident of that up here, but you're not comfortable to walk in it because you think, oh, like something's going to go wrong if you walk in that, right? Well, the cool thing is that when you're walking in that which you know, right? Like when you hear the Lord tell you, go ahead and walk in that newness of life, he's not asking you to walk in what you don't know. He's not asking you to take a leap of faith the way Hollywood talks about it. He's saying, just, you know what? Go ahead. You continue to trust me. Go ahead and walk in what you know. Walk in what you know. And that he's not asking you to do something stupid. He's not asking you to do something that would eventually hurt you. He's just saying, you know what? Be comfortable in what you know. Be comfortable in what you know, and you know what I'm trying to do. I'm trying not to add to that, right? I'm just trying to communicate it to you exactly the way that I had a sense about it. Just, you know what? Just go ahead and walk in the newness of life that you have. So you cannot walk in what you don't know, but you can walk in the newness of life, right? That you do understand and the things that you do know.
We hope you enjoyed this message from Reformed Church. If you have, please share this with someone else and help us get this unpopular message to the world. If you'd like to support Reformed Church, you can do so at reforminus.com/give. Also on our website, you can take advantage of our free messages, articles, and even full discipleship courses. Start reforming your mind now at reforminus.com.